Hey everyone, Captain Migraine here. Just wanted to show off the latest feature I've been working on for Clutchball. It is called the Curve Builder, and this is just a really useful blueprint that I've been working on that can help facilitate the creation of curved pieces. This is something that has always been uh, kind of a sore spot for me because I really like making curved pieces, but it can quickly become overwhelming because there's all sorts of different variables that you have to take into consideration. You have to take into consideration the radius, the degrees, the width, and the thickness. And if you want to rotate the curved piece, you can quickly see how that will amount to like hundreds of hours of work in Autodesk Maya or 3ds Max or Blender or whatever 3D modeling program of your choice. And so I have spent probably 30 plus hours on this blueprint. Essentially, uh, it is just a collection of splines and tons of math. So let me go ahead and show off how this works. So over here in the details panel, I've tried to organize things as best as I can, but then there's a lot of miscellaneous options down here that I can choose from. So anyway, I can scrub these slider bars, and then it will choose between I want to say presets, but they're not actually presets. What's happening here is that the radius value is just being snapped to increments of 64. And so when I scale this, it snaps to basically increments of 64. I can adjust the degrees, so I can make 45-degree pieces, 90-degree pieces, 135, basically all the way to 360. So I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. So I can adjust the radius, I can adjust the degrees, I can adjust the width, and I can even adjust the thickness. So there's tons of power in this. On top of that, if I increase the width beyond 1024 units, it will start inserting additional splines. So that's just another way that you can save time with this blueprint. So let's see what other kind of crazy things I can come up with. So let me go ahead and decrease the width of this, and then I also have a roll value that I can adjust in here, which I've converted to degrees just for simplicity. So I can roll this, so you can get pretty crazy results just by rolling that. And again, you can still continue to adjust the thickness, the width, and the radius, and even the degrees. So fairly useful blueprint. Everything is extremely accurate. Now, one of the main features of this blueprint is that it automatically determines the number of pieces needed for a given situation. So if I decrease the radius, it switches to 3 pieces. If I decrease it even further, it'll switch to 2 pieces, and then 1 piece. And I have a way that you can disable the auto calculation for the length. So if I just uncheck that, and it doesn't change anything because the number of pieces has already been calculated. So now I can actually scrub this slider bar here, and I can manually choose however many pieces I want. And it'll calculate the necessary width and basically everything. Whenever it's finished, you can very easily turn the collision on. Right now it's off, so I just choose block all, and then if I turn on my collision, you can see that this is the end result. Extremely clean collision. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I made the collision in Autodesk Maya. And so I think that this is simply looking at my existing collision, and it's determining that my existing collision can be used for this. So it's not actually, I don't think it's generating brand new collision. I think it's just reusing my existing collision, which is great because it's extremely clean, and that's going to be perfect for clutch ball since he's a ball, and extremely clean collision is really important. So, and also if I happen to leave override collision set to block all, it's going to be really slow to adjust these values. And the reason for that is collision on splines is really slow to generate. So it's best to just leave that on default, and then it will just, the default collision of a spline is no collision. What else? I can also, let me go ahead and reset my roll value. And then if I go in here and tell it to auto-calculate number of pieces width, if I uncheck that, now whenever I increase the width, it will always remain as a single piece, although in this case it gets really stretched out. So that's no good. So I generally like to leave the auto-calculate width enabled, and that will try to choose the best piece for the job. On top of that, if I wanted more pieces in here, what I could do is I could uncheck that, and then I could increase the number of pieces manually, so I can fine-tune that to whatever I want. And it will basically conform all of those pieces. And it starts to get really sluggish at this point because that is an awful lot of splines. Which, if my memory serves me right, splines are draw call intensive. So for each of these, I believe each of these represents an additional draw call, and so this is a lot of draws. And so anyway, the purpose of this is so that you can generate a piece very quickly, very easily. And once you've figured out what you want to do with it, let me just go ahead and just place this right here. And I'm just going to increase the radius. And I'm going to make sure that that's lined up, centered. Alright. And then let me go ahead and increase the width. So once you've come up with a design, what you can do is you can open up the merge actors utility, and this shows you exactly how many actors are going to be merged. So quite a few. A lot of actors are being merged here, or rather a lot of components. And so I'm going to go ahead and just merge that, and I'm just going to choose my bullshit folder because I don't have a better name for a folder. Save that. And now essentially what it did is it just converted that to a single static mesh. And as you can see, the collision got completely destroyed, which is a bug of the merge actor utility. So this is going to be a good way to reduce draw calls, but obviously it's not going to be so hot for collision. So I'm either just going to wait until this bug gets addressed, or I will create custom blocking volumes for this, for anytime I use the cylinder builder or the curve builder. So another feature about this that's really useful is it's just like my cube builder. Let me go ahead and close that. It's just like my cube builder blueprint in the sense that it automatically determines the best mesh for the job. So Let me go ahead and just use this as an example right here. The cube builder, depending on what I set my dimensions to, it is constantly trying to figure out the best mesh for the job. And that is so that it can reduce texture warping and also mesh warping. And so I've actually coded in a lot of different scenarios that would it would basically choose the best mesh for the job to reduce stretching. So you can see here that the rounded corner on the bevel on these curved pieces are fairly uniform. They're not being stretched too much. And that is based on width, circumference, and degrees as well. So I believe I've got several different variables all contributing to the calculation of what the best mesh for the job would be. And so let me just go ahead and open up my blueprint. It's this function right here, determine mesh. And it's fairly sophisticated. It's as simple as I could possibly get it. Essentially what it's doing is it's checking the circumference of each piece, it's checking the width of each piece, and it's checking the thickness of each piece. And then it's basically just going through a custom struct that I created, and it's choosing the correct struct for that. And then once it finds the struct for that, then it sets it to a variable called chosen spline info. And the chosen spline info basically contains which particular mesh to use. It contains a manual box extent, so in other words, the dimensions of that mesh. It contains rotation info, whether the mesh should be rotated. And the reason for that is I believe there's a lot of different possibilities here. And so rotating a spline makes it so that you can reuse pieces. And also I have a random rotation value in here, which is currently just defaulted to 180 degrees. And so what that's doing is it's trying to rotate each of these pieces 180 degrees to try to cut down on pattern repetition. So might be kind of difficult to see, but essentially it's randomly rotating these pieces. So if you look right here, so you got this little tiny scratch right here, and if you look right here, I believe it's different. So you can see there's a different scratch here, and that's the result of each of these pieces being randomly rotated. So overall, pretty useful. I'm trying to think what else do I have in here. I also have random rotation streams. So if I change this number to say 4 or 2 or 1, there we go. It changes the randomization, although it looks like it's not working. It may have a bug. Actually, I'm editing the wrong value. Might help if I edited the right value. So let me go ahead and choose like 4,000. There we go. So that just changes the rotation. Fairly useful. So let me go ahead and show off a particular scenario in which I would use this blueprint. So let me go ahead and find that curve builder, drag this out, and then I'm just going to position this in place. And so I'm going to go ahead and increase the width to 1024, and I kind of want this to repeat, so I'm going to do 4096, so it's going to repeat like that. And then I want this to have a larger radius, and I also want it to meet up with the top of this cube. So I got to switch to my orthographic view, and the radius is based on the center point of the spline. And so this is going to be a little bit weird. So I have this other feature in here called offset spline by radius. So let me check that and move this back down. And so now whenever I increase the radius, the spline mesh will basically stay exactly in its original position. So it's useful for making curved ramps like this. And it met perfectly up with this cube, which I would then just kind of move off to the side. And so that's how I'd make a ramp with a 1024 radius. And if I don't like the thickness of that, then I can change the thickness. Let me set that to 1024. And in this case, it screws it up because, as I said before, it's basically centering the radius. And so what I'd have to do is move this down and then increase the radius again until it lines up. And because of the auto calculation, it basically determined that it should split this into two pieces. And so to fix that, I'm just going to turn off the auto calculation for length and then set the number of pieces to 1, and then that fixes that. So that's how I would make like a ramp in that case. And then once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the collision. Hopefully the collision generates correctly. Block all, and looks like it worked. Alright, let's go ahead and test it out. Yep, works great. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this. Let's see if I can maybe use it in this area right here. Actually, I'll start on the other side because I know this side is lined up correctly on the grid. So I'm just going to rotate this, and then I'm going to increase the thickness. That should be 256. Looks good. And I'm going to increase this. I believe this is the width. Let's do 1024. And it basically chooses the best piece for the job, and it looks like it fits perfectly. There's no extreme texture stretching or anything like that. So this is working great. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. And it's basically the culmination of, I would say, 30 plus hours of work in the blueprint. And also, this is not the first spline that I've made. It's not my first rodeo, so to speak. So every time I attempt to make a new spline blueprint, it ends up turning out better than the last one. And this is by far the best result. So anyway, thanks for watching.